from Liverpool. This is Pete at Eurovision. So, after the final, I had this grand plan that I was going to do a different video every night looking at a different aspect of the contest. And we did one of those videos where we looked at how Liverpool did at hosting this year's Eurovision Song Contest. And then, like so many other people, I got hit by the Eurovision flu and have lost my voice, had a sore throat. I know some people have ended up really unwell, which I suppose is what happens when 100,000 people sit in a giant super spreader event. But I'm slightly better than I was last week. So in this video we're going to talk about the semi-finalists who didn't qualify for the final of the contest. Because I think there's quite a lot to say about them. There's some very good songs that didn't qualify for this year's contest, and I think they're worthy of a mention and a shout out, and maybe a little bit of a head scratch as to what went wrong for them. So I've got a list here, and I'm going to go through them in basically any order that takes me. I'm going to spend about 1 to 2 minutes on each one, so that this video doesn't go on forever, because we have got 11 songs to talk about. So out of nowhere, let's start with Denmark and Riley and his song Breaking My Heart. What went wrong for Riley? Riley ended up not doing all that well, and in his second semi-final. I've always said that Breaking My Heart is actually a decent little pop song, and it's got a memorable hook of and it's got quite a nice sort of memorable bit to it, and it's quite a nice pop. It's one of those songs I could sort of almost imagine, I don't know, maybe not Harry Styles, but someone, maybe even One Direction in those days, doing a song like this. So what went wrong for Riley? Well, I think there's two things really. I think his vocal was not that great on the night. I was in the jury rehearsal the night before, and he was sort of struggling with his first verse, and it got a lot better as he went through. But he sounded, he had some vocal effects on the chorus, but not as much as what he had at Danske Melodi Grand Prix, and it just didn't sound quite as convincing. The other thing was the staging. He looked very alone on that stage. You've got this massive stage, and you've got this there was just something about him that he didn't own the stage very well. I don't know why they got rid of the dancers from Danske Melodi Grand Prix. They actually really helped with his performance. There was something very sort of lonely. He's quite a sort of, he looked, how to describe it without being mean, and he looked very small on that stage compared to someone like the Cypriot entry, who looked like a sort of big strong chap on the stage. Riley just looked like sort of a very sort of lonely, diminutive person on that stage. And I think he should have kept his dancers, because I think that would have given us something more to look at in the video. The other thing is that, speaking of videos, was that the staging changed quite a bit, and I think it tried to match what he did in his music video. Now the music video is him in different colourful rooms, and they tried to do that on stage by having a revolving set. Now what I saw in the jury final is that he's got about 7 or 8 stagehands manically rotating that stage, different things, and it just didn't work. Trying to replicate the music video on stage was not the right thing to do, in my opinion. So I'm disappointed for Riley, because I think it was actually a decent song, but on the night it just, both the look of it and the sound of it just didn't come off. Let's move on to, I'm picking these at random really. Let's go on to Romania and Theodore. I mean, this was one of those songs that was never in the favourites list for a lot of people, and didn't do all that well in the polls. The sad thing about this song is that the first minute where it's him sat with a guitar is actually a decent little song. It reminds me of and I'm feeling good, dum, ba-dum, dum, ba-dum. And being reminded of other songs isn't really a bad thing. But I just feel as though it just got increasingly seedy as the song went on. And obviously in the national final it was incredibly sort of suggestive, and there were women in their underwear, and they were gone for this, but there was still something quite unnervingly seedy about it. The background videos that they had were not very high quality. they just didn't in the arena, looking at his background projections. They looked like Doctor Who blue screen effects from the 70s. They just weren't all that good. And then the backing dancer that did come on, who some sort of sprinted on, rubbed his chest a bit, and then finished. I don't really know what it added for him. So I can see why things didn't go well. But let's give this lad some credit. He's 18, and it sounds as though the Romanian broadcaster haven't been all that supportive to him. And he's gone out on stage in front of millions of people and done something that I could never do. So let's, give some positives to the guy. And I hope he looks back on his experience positively, but I can see why that particular song didn't qualify. Let's move on to Greece, another young entrant, Victor. He's 16, he's got an amazing voice. I think he wrote the song as well, or he had a hand in writing the song. But it just didn't connect on the night. And I think watching the final, I watched it on TV, there was a lot of animated jumping around in terms of the choreography, and that actually impacted on his vocal. That's my belief. Look, I'm not an expert in neither dancing nor singing, but for me watching it, it was like watching a performance very slowly fall apart, and that's so unfortunate. There was all this sort of jumping up and down and things and running about. In my view, he should have just delivered it as a straight camera microphone, maybe a little bit of walking about, but there was a lot of, and the costume. I mean, we know he's 16. We don't need to dress him like a Boy Scout, And the thing is, and again, it's so unusual, isn't it? He's 16, but he looks like an adult. And again, compared to Riley, who's much older but looks much younger. So I don't really understand the costume choice. It's like they had a 16-year-old, I don't want to say boy, but they had a 16-year-old person, who looks much older than he is, and then they dressed him back to a sort of part Boy Scout, part I'm a celebrity contestant. It was really unusual. It's unfortunate. Look, there's an argument to be said about should we be sending 16-year-olds, particularly that heartbreaking video of him not qualifying and the Greek delegation just sort of sitting there impotently, and his dad and someone from the Estonian delegation having to sort of commiserate him. So yeah, poor lad. I mean, but look, the guy's got a cracking voice and he wrote the song, and I think that is commendable to him. Let's move on. Georgia. I always struggled with Georgia as a song. I just found it a bit. I was sat next to somebody else in the semi-final rehearsal, and her opinion, put very succinctly, was, I like the sound of it, but the words are nonsense, and that really puts me off. Now, I don't know whether the Eurovision fans who will listen to a song 100 times and analyse it to death, maybe they will go to that level of lyrical analysis. I'm not sure whether the televoters listening for 3 minutes would do the same. But the sad thing is that I heard Ira perform this in the Lush Lounge with just a piano and a very slow version of the song, and that was beautiful. It was wonderful, but there was just something. I've used this phrase a lot during the contest this year, of the idea of being punched in the face by a song. And Cha 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 by Karia, that's. But this was like being punched in the face, but just not in a sort of all that nice. It was just at you, but it wasn't. It didn't feel all that pleasant. Staging was nice. I liked the dress, and you could see in the semi-final rehearsal, you could see that her dress was actually tied back to things by stagehands. So that was always a really interesting insight. Being in the jury rehearsals and watching those stagehands, is that the right word? The stage crew, I beg your pardon, and how hard they work. There's a scene. This is a complete aside now, but in the Estonian entry, you can see that some guy got to sprint on, plant a microphone stand down, and sprint back out, and the guys are clapping him because it's such hard work. But yeah, Iceland, Power, Dilja. It's actually a nice pop song. It's actually a really good. I didn't warm to it the first few times I heard it, but I actually did like it in the end. But this was another one where sort of chaotic staging sort of got in the way of the song. There was a lot of unusual kinetics going on, shall we say, from her dance performance, and I don't know if that was an attempt to make it stand out or what, but it just didn't quite connect for me. I possibly would have put it into the top 10 actually, ahead of some other countries. With a lot of these songs in semi-final 2, it's very easy to say, well, I can understand why they didn't qualify. With Iceland, I'm sort of struggling slightly because it's a good up-tempo pop song, and she's got a decent voice, but again, just maybe how it looked on stage wasn't quite right. The interesting thing with semi-final 2 is that the difference between 10th and 11th is a good 40 odd points. So there was a real, definite, discernible jump in the voting as to what people felt about it. And then finally from semi-final 2, let's talk about San Marino and Peak Jacks. I've got a little bit of sympathy for them because from the minute they won, people slagged them off. People said they weren't very good. People were shouting or chanting for I've forgotten her name. Last year's Albanian entry who took part in the San Marino final. People were chanting for her in some of the pre-parties, and to the point where San Marino television had to say, look, can you stop with the abuse? This is not nice. The bottom line for Peak Jacks is they entered the competition of San Marino and they won it. And they won it under the rules of whatever competition they had. Now you can argue that maybe Albano and 4 other people, picking the winner for San Marino is perhaps not the best way of doing it. But in a country that can't even hold a televote in Eurovision, how are they going to pick the winner? But maybe a judging panel of 5 led by a guy who did Eurovision 40 years ago is maybe not the way to do it. But that is all an aside, because they won, and they won fairly, and they went. And they made light of the fact that people were constantly putting them in 37th place. I actually don't think they were the worst performance of the night, and I've said this in a few videos. Musically, that song is really good. It's actually a nice track. It's a nice sort of bit of guitar, sort of rock type track. It reminds me of sort of, the verses in particular remind me of some of these sort of songs you'd hear on the Joshua Tree by U2. Now maybe that's just my opinion, but who knows. The problem for them was that their song was quite repetitive. By the time you were 2 minutes in, you'd heard the chorus 3 or 4 times. The ending, I mean, again, impressive vocals with that sort of high ooh ah type thing, but again, sort of, it just didn't go anywhere. There was a minute of that, and then the song ended. But it definitely wasn't the worst song of the night, and for people to constantly place it 37th was probably very unfair. So I've got a lot of time, and I think we need to think about how the collective fandom, how our actions will impact on people. Because do you want to represent your country when the minute you win your national final you're told that you're crap? Do you want to represent your country when you go on the pre-party tour and everyone else is having a great time and you're being chanted for by some person that... Let's be honest about, again, I'm so sorry I've forgotten her name, but the last year's Albanian entry had to come through a second chance qualifying round to get to the final of Un Voce por San Marino. So let's not pretend that this was some close run thing, you know. This was just fans deciding that they wanted a fan favourite back, which is interesting because now Eurovision fans are saying, oh, Lorene's done it once so she shouldn't do it again, but we're quite happy to let someone else come in for San Marino. That is by the by. I'm sure I'll get a thumbs down off somebody for that. So that's semi-final 1. And I think it's pretty easy to say why some of those songs went wrong. Semi-final 1 is a much harder kettle of fish because the separation between 10th and 11th was 3 points. So a real difference in the voting there. Although actually 8 of Latvia's points came from that rest of the world vote. So maybe that would... that rest of the world had a bit of an influence on what happened. So let's move on to Latvia, the country that came 11th and were beaten by 3 points. Southern Lights are a great band. I think what happens is that you get an affinity for the bands that you meet during the week in the contest. So I was really lucky to go and see them at a Latvian embassy concert in a park in Liverpool the week before the contest, and they performed a few songs and their new single in a bandstand, and they were great. They were awesome, and they were so good live, and it was really great to hear them. And then I saw them again at the Lush Lounge, where again they performed a few songs. They did a song by Brainstorm, a former Latvian entrance, and they did their single Backwards in Time. Backwards in Time is an outstanding single. Buy it. You should all buy it. What went wrong for Southern Lights then? I don't know. Aya is a perfect rock song to me. I really enjoy it, and a little bit more version of it with the piano again. I really liked it. I'm scratching my head as to how it didn't qualify. Maybe two things. Connection with the camera. The lead singer didn't do much work in sort of actually looking at the camera. He was sort of performing to his artists, he was performing to the people in the arena, and maybe people noticed that. I don't know if that's enough. His vocal was perfect. I can't fault his vocal at all. The other thing maybe is what was I going to say? The staging of it. I don't know. I enjoyed the staging of it. What you saw was a band on stage who looked like they were having a great time. But maybe the final, again, maybe it suffers from the same problem that Peak Jacks had. That final bit, it's really nice. I like it, but it goes on maybe just a little bit too long for the audience to connect with. I don't know. I thought it was beautifully staged. Karine Cummings, who was the official EBU photographer, took an outstanding photo during the contest, and if you can see her Twitter account and see what a beautiful photo she did of the performance. I think Southern Lights used it on their Twitter account to say what a great time they had. I hope they come back, and I hope they qualify again. I hope they qualify, because I think they're really good. And I hope they come to the UK, because I really want to see them, because I just think that, again, I think you get an affinity for bands that you meet, and sort of you want them to do well. But I can think of other songs that I wouldn't want qualifying Croatia. We'll come back to Croatia. Ireland, another band. I mean, Ireland had the same problem as Peak Jacks, that people, unfortunately, didn't really want them there. People wanted Midnight Summer Night to go. Now, we need to talk about Ireland's relationship to Eurovision, and maybe that's a topic for another video. But maybe doing it on the Late Late Show when you're flogging peanut butter in the middle of a song contest is not the right thing to do. I was told by one of my Irish fan friends that it's entirely normal for the Late Late Show to suddenly promote a gift or a thing that the whole audience get during the competition. But to us as outsiders who don't watch the Late Late Show very often, what we're watching is a Eurovision national final where a load of peanut butter is being given out, and we're sat there scratching our heads. Would Midnight Summer Night have done any better? I don't know. I think maybe with a revamp it probably could have qualified. But Wild Youth had the same problem as Peak Jacks, that they were told from the minute that they won, this is a bad song, this is awful, this isn't going to qualify. They must have gone and thought, well, what's the point? I can see why Connor felt upset by some of the things that were going on. There is an issue here with RTE. There's many issues, and again, this is a conversation for another video, but you know, RTE did not set a voting limit on how many times you could vote for an act, and we heard stories of people spending thousands of euros voting for Wild Youth, and look, that's their money and they can do what they want, but it also then skews your vote massively, that it just becomes a who's the most popular rather than who's got the best song. I was in the jury rehearsal for Wild Youth. There was a delay, something happened to the mic packs and there had to be a sort of VT for a minute. So they got the guys out on stage and then they showed a VT. And you could see Connor looked incredibly stressed. I don't want to say he wasn't dealing with the pressure, but he was pacing the floor. I just think they've probably not had a good time. I saw them perform at the Cavern after the Busker. And again, they sounded quite good. They performed to a backing track in the Cavern. Which is fine, but again, I just sort of, there was always problems with this song, and I don't think getting into and they were looked on favourably in their battle with a well-known wizard author. But I'm not sure that's enough to get you into the final, because the quality of the song has to shine through. And it was all just a bit. You've got this band with guitars and doing an anthemic song, but you've got a guy in a gold spangly jumpsuit. Look, you'd expect Justin from the Darkness to turn up in a spangly golden jumpsuit, because they do sort of funny rock songs. I'm so old. But you've got this guy doing a serious anthemic type, let's all clap our hands sort of song, and he's doing it in a gold jumpsuit. It all just seemed a bit incongruous to me. What do Ireland do next? I mean, they need to get rid of the Late Late Show. Some people have said they need the National Song Contest back, but that doesn't. You need the quality of songs to be there. Now, maybe if you say, well, you know what, we're going to have a National Song Contest, we're going to have it in our biggest arena, we're going to sell thousands of tickets, we'll promote it in the same way as maybe the Melody Fest or whatever, then artists might go, do you know what, I want that 3 minutes in an arena, and I will put a good song in, as opposed to, I'm going to have 3 minutes on the Late Late Show. I don't know. Azerbaijan, Tell Me More. I liked Tell Me More. I thought it was a really good song, and it was really minimalist staging, just stood on a giant heart singing their song. So why didn't it qualify? Well, I just think there were better songs on the night, I think, and maybe having a sort of quite simple song when there were so many other things going on. You had Sweden, you had Finland, you had Norway, and maybe with this sort of song coming on at some point, it just didn't flow right. But that's not to say that. I think Azerbaijan took a risk this year. They tried something different. They used homegrown talent, and it hasn't worked out for them. I hope they persist with homegrown talent, because it's good, and it's rather than heading from songwriting camps. I enjoyed their performance. I just think it probably just got missed or forgotten about in the mix of it all. The Netherlands, Dion and Mia. They gave a nice performance in the jury rehearsal that I attended. I think Dion, he struggled a little bit with some of his lyrics, particularly in the first verse. I know they had to raise the song by 3 semitones, and actually by doing that, it sort of made it sound a bit of a happier sounding song, which I don't think was the intention. It actually sounds more emotional in the original lower key. When I hear that original song, I still get the goosebumps from it. I still think it's a great song. The staging, I think they had some sort of revolving runway or something that they walked on, but it just felt like this was a thing that happened and we can move on. I don't think you got the emotional impact of what you got from the music video. But there's a problem here for the Netherlands now, because they have been treated appallingly. The Dutch press have treated them not very well. They've criticised their vocals. They changed the song to make people happy. And the Dutch have got a real problem now, because who's gonna step into the breach? And I believe there are Dutch artists who are saying, well, actually, I'll do it. But is this how you want to be treated? Because it doesn't sound all that good to me, as Josh Jabobi nearly once said. And finally, Malta, the busker dance. I love this song, and I confidently predicted this song would go through. And I saw these guys at the Cavern, and I shook the lead singer's hand, and I said, "You are going to qualify. You are going to smash this." And I put the absolute kiss of death on it. And not only did they not qualify, but they came last with 3 points. I just don't get it. I can't. So I still can't put into words. Some people have sort of said that maybe the staging didn't connect well. That again, that thing of trying to create a narrative by doing it in different rooms, similar to maybe what Riley did, just doesn't connect very well. But I thought it was great. Some people thought that the Maltese in-joke at the beginning would have put people off, but they're just cardboard cutouts of people having a party while the lead singer's not enjoying himself. That it doesn't matter if you can't recognise everyone or the cardboard cutouts. I don't think that matters all that much. There was a suggestion that maybe mimicking Michael Jackson's dance moves would be somewhat problematic for people. And again, I didn't see that until someone pointed it out to me, so I'm not sure that that's actually the case. Ultimately, I think this is a tragedy. I just think it's an absolute robbery. And I think the busker did so well in Liverpool. You know, they played the Euro Village, they played the Cabin, they did the Lush Lounge, they gave out some pretty cool merchandise. They had a good social media presence. They did that amazing A Little Bit More video with an orchestra, which is really just outstanding. And I know the competition is not, you know, who's done the most, you know, who's the nicest person or whatever, but they were amazing live. Hearing them in the Cabin performing live with the sax and then the guitars, they were outstanding. I genuinely think they were robbed, and I just can't work out why they didn't qualify. Again, was it that this was just a group of deaf? I am irritated that a song like this missed out for something like Croatia. And even Serbia. I didn't like Serbia that much. I thought the staging was weird. The game over thing. You know, look. You know, he said bitch on stage once. He's a great guy. It just didn't do it for me as a song, I'm afraid. Croatia, I could happily have not seen them in the final. That, to me, Croatia is a regressive step for the contest. And I know people say they're a serious band with a serious message. Well, look, if Coldplay have a serious message but they do it with a bad song, it's still a bad song. And I don't like Coldplay that much, but that's sort of the, you know. Again, it comes back to, we as fans will analyse these songs for weeks and weeks and weeks, but the average viewer, they're not seeing a serious band or a serious song. They're seeing a load of people messing about with giant polystyrene rockets. And they vote for that. But then they don't buy the single because it doesn't appear in the charts anywhere. And I think that's the point, is that when you put an entire televote on, if you've got a silly, and it is silly, I'm sorry, you can try and convince me it's a serious song, but it's just not. That's my opinion. I'm sure the band are lovely. I'm sure that, you know, and obviously their sort of activism is commendable. But I just, you know, I could have happily not seen them in the contest, particularly when Latvia were missing out, when Malta were missing out. It reminded me of the sort of thing you would have heard on Eurotrash in the late 90s when you were a teenager. So yeah, that's it. But you know, I think Malta, you know, but you can't even blame Croatia for Malta because Malta did so badly in the televote. So I've gone on a bit of a rant there, but to give it some credit, that they just didn't score enough points. Now, was it the lack of Maltese diaspora around Europe? Was it the lack of neighbours? Was it the curse of song number 2? I don't believe in the curse of song. I think the curse of song number 2 is something that producers of a certain era made happen. But was following Norway a problem? I don't think it was, because you had Norway having their very big song, but Malta had an equally big, fun song. So I don't think you can blame that for it. I just don't know. And it makes me really sad because I think the guys did really well all week long, and they engaged with the fans and they performed really well each time. So I don't know. Would the juries have saved them? I don't know, because again, vocally, it's, you know, it's not that vocally challenging. Hey, so the juries might have gone, well, this is not a particularly vocally challenging song. I don't know, but they might have remembered it. This, I mean, to me, it's one of the greatest tragedies in Eurovision, but maybe that's being a bit harsh. Right, that's all 11. What do you think? If you've got to the end of this half-an-hour rant, then well done. You probably haven't, but what do you think? Comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we'll see you soon with my next video when my voice fully returns to some sort of health. And I'll see you soon. This is Speak from University saying I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.